And we are live. Hello, everybody. Today we have one of the coolest and most high profile guests that I've ever had on the show. She's somebody who's working behind the scenes at one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world, and she's helping shape how science and nutrition are communicated to the public. Morgan Sowers is an associate principal scientist on PepsiCo's health and nutrition sciences team, and she's one of several registered dietitians working to translate research into action. She holds a master's in health promotion and education, an MBA in marketing, and a PhD in community nutrition. She's currently focused on external engagement, bridging the gap between science and the people who need it most, whether that's consumers, fitness professionals, or policy leaders. She and her team also have created Empowered Education, which is a free evidence-based resource built specifically to help personal trainers and fitness coaches improve how they talk about food and nutrition. I really can't recommend this one enough. So if you are a coach listening to this, we're going to be talking about this a little bit more depth later into the episode. So feel free to look at the timestamps. But this is seriously a resource that a lot of you should be looking at, especially if you don't have kind of like a study reference log built up. And I actually gave Morgan credit for this, for her and her team, that they include all the research at the bottom of every single post that they make. So if you're ever curious about, food dyes or any topic, really, you guys are just crushing it. You guys should go look at that. In this episode, we dig into science communication, the public's distrust of air quote big food, the role of processed food in a healthy diet, and what it really looks like to promote health at scale. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
It's really, when I was first reaching out to you and I started, looking at who you are as a person, it felt like I was kind of being bombarded with how, like, your education level, like, it's insane. It's super impressive. What originally got you down that road and then into PepsiCo?
Yeah, no, I was in school for a very long time. So I really just started kind of with my passion. I'm passionate about nutrition and dietetics. And also I really enjoyed education. Started out in education before I switched my major, but really enjoyed like communication and education. So I started school and really wanted to become a registered dietitian. And I feel like that kind of helped me understand and have the expertise on a variety of different topics related to nutrition. And then from there, I went and got my master's in health promotion. I think public health is something that has always really interested me. And I really just want to make the healthy choice the easy choice, and really just focus on that translation of different messaging and nutrition information. So from there, I went to get my PhD. I feel like that has really helped me to just be able to evaluate and interpret a lot of the nutrition science research that's out there. And then while I was doing my PhD, I also did my MBA in marketing. And as kind of using that communication education, I feel like the marketing aspect of my education has really helped me to craft those messages. So as far as why PepsiCo, a couple different reasons. The first one being that I feel like we are unique in that we have a really broad scope of products in our portfolio. So we have different types of foods and beverages, variety of different brands and types of products. And so I'm able to work with a lot of different products and information. I also think that because we're such a large company, there's a large potential impact because of just the scope and the volume of the work that we do. So I feel like that's exciting. The second reason why I was drawn to PepsiCo was just the unique health and nutrition sciences team. I think that's something that is not found in all companies, but it's really just has a lot of different nutrition science and health experts on my team that are, like you said, are focused on kind of interpreting and translating the latest nutrition science, diet, just to advance the portfolio and advance different products in different ways.
So you did a PhD and an MBA at the same time?
I did. Don't recommend.
I can't even imagine that because I've never done a master's, I've never done a PhD, an MBA, anything like that. I have my Bachelor of Arts. Like, it's not,
Yeah.
I'm not even in like the exercise science field technically. I mean, now I am, but it's by continued education on my own. By education, I am a communications major because I had no idea what I wanted to do. So, respect to you for doing both those at the same time because I've heard the workload for both those is crazy.
It's
One of
insane.
the things that I've heard about people who are considering, going from the master's to the PhD is only do it if you have a burning question that you want to answer. And maybe this is specific because I'm in this bubble of exercise and nutrition, right? But and obviously you're in the nutrition space too. But did you have a burning question that you wanted to answer, or what was that kind of decision making process like for you to pursue your PhD?
I mean, Alex, I have a ton of burning questions. I have burning questions every day. So I feel like that's really kind of what the PhD does is it helps me figure out what I need to like the skills that I need to answer those questions. So I think the question evolves, but I think, it did teach me those research skills and the research translation skills to be able to dig into the science to answer those questions. My specific question, I guess, for my dissertation is how do we, like I said, how do we make food easier to access, whether it's, availability, affordability, accessibility, whatever we need to do to make the healthy choice the easy choice. There's a lot of food out there. So what can we do to help people make, the choice that's right for them?
The things that you mentioned in our first meeting that we didn't record or anything like that. It was just kind of a get to know each other kind of thing. One of the first things that you mentioned was that you're able to impact millions, with your current position. And I think that is a really, really cool perspective. You have, some input on Fritos or Cheetos or Quaker Oats or anything like that, right? And that impacts, it impacts me. It impacts my friends. It impacts my family. It impacts the entire world on a on a scale that is very hard to grasp, I think, for a lot of people in their day-to-day jobs. So most people probably have no idea what a scientist does at a company like PepsiCo. What does your day-to-day look like on the health and nutrition sciences team?
Yeah. So again, it probably differs day to day. But overall, like you said, we're really just acting as the bridge between the science that's out there and our product development, product portfolio. And so, we're making sure that our products are meeting our positive, corporate goals for nutrition. We're just providing a variety of different choices, again, for consumers. I've had a couple of different roles within nutrition sciences team. And so I have previously worked on the innovation side of the business where I, guided new product development or new product innovation or renovation. And just help to maximize the nutrition of our products. Also ensuring that all of the communication that we're putting out there about the products are scientifically accurate and appropriate for those products. So that's kind of the business support side of my team. There's also different people in my team that are focused on research. So they're monitoring, evaluating, and even conducting research to support nutrition and health claims and also the impact of different ingredients of our products. So that's a separate part of my team. My current role, like you said, in the engagement side of our team is to really just take that evidence-based approach and share scientific and nutrition information and education. Also facilitate obviously engaging discussions with, the public, make sure that we're, interacting in a positive way. And then to build awareness of our team's expertise and some of the great work that we're doing. So we'll plan various professional conferences. We'll develop education resources, like you mentioned, for different websites. And then we'll also, promote our work via social media, newsletters, so different methods. But it's really just kind of building that awareness and making sure that we're getting the word out about what we're doing.
It's not a hot take to say that there's a lot of misinformation on social media. That's not a hot take at all. But what I want to know, with this kind of climate of social media misinformation going on, good information, bad information, everything in between, right? What's something that the public seriously misunderstands about large food companies like PepsiCo and how nutrition is handled internally, and kind of those, like you said, those nutrient density decisions?
Yeah. So I think, the fact that we do have a large and well established like health and nutrition sciences team, I think that really just shows the value that PepsiCo places on evidence based nutrition science. I think that's something that we've realized in our conversations, many people don't know or appreciate. So I feel like that in itself is kind of telling. I also think, as an RD in industry, we really have a privilege to play a part in developing the nutrition profile of foods. Again, like you said, that they're consumed billions of times a day, all around the world by many different people. And then I think that, improving the nutrition of products that people already know and love, but then also creating new products that, provide different nutritional aspects or different even enjoyment aspects to reach a broad range of consumer needs, I think is just really, really important. It's something that we put a lot of effort and pride into. I think that hopefully everyone realizes that we really do put a large amount of effort into communicating truthful and scientific based information. We are checking the claims on products. We are making sure that our products are moving in the direction of our pet positive goals. And we're really just always keeping the consumers in mind and making sure that we're helping them be informed and helping them make decisions that are right for them. So hopefully that everyone gets a little bit more aware of the efforts and the links that we're going to make sure that, we're providing that information.
I think it's when I post some of my reels, sometimes I post like what I eat in a day reels, not super frequently because I think they can be positive, they can be negative depending on, the delivery, but also how a person is accepting that message. Are they using it for ideas or are they using it like, oh, if I want to look like him, I need to eat like him? That's a different, takeaway from that I wouldn't want them to have. But basically, without fail, every single time that I post that I'm eating, it doesn't matter if it's oatmeal, if it's not hand-picked oatmeal from a farm, right? There's somebody who's going to tell me that I'm eating processed junk. A lot of people think that, which is just ridiculous, right? I'm having a high protein, high fiber, breakfast. But a lot of people think that processed inherently and automatically means bad. So what nuance do you think gets lost in that conversation, and how do you personally approach this topic?
A couple of things that I think are important to consider when we talk about, processed foods and processing. So I think first of all, people don't realize that a majority, if not all of the foods that we eat are processed to some degree, and they have to be so that we're able to eat them. So for example, oats have to be hulled. They can't be eaten raw. They have to be hulled before, they're able to be eaten. That's a form of processing. I think, anytime we cut, blend, cook, otherwise prepare foods, that's processing. So it's, there's different methods of processing. There's different types of processing, and it's all to kind of make it more palatable for us to eat. So I think that's using processing as a blanketed term. That's one kind of nuance in it. There's many reasons why that we process foods. I think for food safety and food stability, shelf stability, that different processing methods remove bacteria and toxins from foods. There's also different processing methods that will maximize the nutritional benefits and nutrient availability of different foods. So think about fortification and enrichment, fortified grains like our life cereal, which are fortified with iron. And that's a nutrient of public health concern because it's underconsumed. That also allows different products like our, cereals to qualify for different feeding programs like the women, infants, and children's feeding programs, or, those populations that underconsume those nutrients. So it's a common practice to do that. That's a method of processing is, that fortification and enrichment. So there are positives to processing that I think aren't necessarily considered when it's somewhat villainized. I also think that it's also not considered that, processing also allows increased food accessibility. So when you think about different positive, foods like canned or frozen fruits and vegetables, that's a form of processing, but that makes it so that they're more readily available, affordable, they're convenient for a large portion of the population that may not be able to access those foods for a variety of different reasons. So I think there are, again, just benefits of processing that we may not consider. I think that there's other aspects that we can look at in terms of the nutrient and other positives of foods rather than just using that blanket term of processing.
Certain foods that are more highly processed are not necessarily, it's not a good way of determining the contribution toward health, how the degree of processing. It's, there may be some more highly processed foods that are more advantageous for trying to complete a nutrient complete diet. So it's that's never been a classification that I've really particularly enjoyed, especially like you said, like cereals. I had a conversation the other day with somebody in my comments on one of my social media posts, and he said, I agree with you on that high protein snacks are I sometimes think they get a little carried away on some ends, but he said, but I really like high protein cereals for kids. And I kind of countered that by saying, well, my perspective on that is that those are not food fortified with all these micronutrients. And when companies do that to cereals, it can be a really, really smart way to help meet or minimize those nutrient deficiencies potentially, to try to round out a child's diet. So, like you said with the iron, yeah, I think not enough people are appreciating that. They just see it as, oh, it's a long ingredient list, therefore must be bad for me. But that's not true in the slightest, and that really doesn't mean anything. I mean, and we have the people who say if you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't eat it. But if you look at like the chemical composition of an orange, for example, there's not going to be any
Yes.
words that you know how to pronounce, you got to take it syllable by syllable. So that's just not another way of
Yeah.
knowing if a food is going to be positive or negative for I'm going to say this, but then I'm also going to lead this into the next question because we agree that, I think we agree that individual foods aren't healthy or unhealthy. It's more about the context of your entire dietary patterns over the long run, right? But that message of foods not being healthy or unhealthy, it doesn't always land with people. How do you think we can shift the conversations toward dietary patterns instead of, these dichotomous fear-based labels?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of times it's kind of easier to grasp that there's like one thing or, one specific portion of your diet that you should focus on when, like you said, in reality, it's a combination of a lot of different things that are going to impact your diet and then even more things that impact your overall health. So I think when we think about, different things that might influence our health. It's not just our diet, it's our physical activity, our mental health, our environmental stressors, those kind of things. It's the same thing with your diet. It's not just carbohydrates that are influence your diet. It's carbohydrates, protein, nutrients, vitamins, minerals. So you have to think about it in terms of a holistic approach. I also think that different foods offer different nutrients and different benefits to us. So I think if you start restricting or, demonizing ingredients or foods that are considered safe, you're missing out on the nutrients and important kind of health benefits they could potentially provide. So I truthfully always push for anything in moderation approach. I think that, if we are doing these extremes where we're cutting out different food groups or we're really restrictive or we're, or in the other end of the spectrum, we're too excessive with certain nutrients or ingredients, that leads often to stress and potentially disrupted eating. And it kind of gets away from the fact that foods and beverages are meant to be enjoyed. So if you want to eat something that you enjoy, eat it, just anything in moderation. I think, there's anything that can fit in a healthy diet. It's really just about that balance and overall lifestyle. When you look at it from a whole day perspective, don't just look at it from a, individual food or an individual meal. I think anything can fit.
Same page with that. And I, some people, when I say messages like that, sometimes on social media or in podcasts, or I'll sometimes get a little bit of a pushback, and people will say, well, what about soda? What about pop? Things like that. But again, it's contextual. Diet soda is awesome. If you want to maintain or potentially lose weight and you are choosing a 0 calorie beverage over, a caloric beverage, like that's a win. That's a way of managing your calorie intake, restricting it to get you into the calorie deficit that, pushes you toward weight loss. And on the opposite side of things, let's say somebody is super, super active and they have a very low appetite. They're struggling to get enough calories in to either maintain or potentially if their goals are related to body weight gain, they need more calories. And so a lot of times I am drinking caloric sodas when I'm trying to gain weight, and those help me. And so it's about using these different foods. I hate to kind of be reductionist in terms of the way that I look at food, because this isn't the only way I look at food. Food is obviously, like you said, meant for enjoyment too, but almost use it as a tool, and what tool is right for which situation, and obviously very simple to do when we're talking about calories, a little bit harder to do, a little bit more nuanced to do when you're thinking about, your fiber, your protein, your carbs and fats, trying to worry about those things. Not something I necessarily overthink too much, but, limiting saturated fat intake, all those kinds of things. But yeah, like you said, you have these different food items in your guys' portfolio that people can use as tools and use them accordingly based on your goal and what your current dietary composition looks like. So you and I are totally on the same page with that. Try, everybody listening, try to move away from thinking process is bad and also from dichotomizing food, as I've talked about so many times. All right, hang on here. Let's not get whiplash. We're going to shift so hard right now, and we're going to talk about your current work with this empowered education. What led you and your team? First off, please give us a brief explanation of what it is and then why you and your team created this resource.
Yeah, so our Empowered Education website is a just evidence-based nutrition information for certified personal trainers and fitness professionals. So I'll give you a little bit of background of why we kind of are targeting the specific population. And then I know we'll get more into kind of what is included on the website. It just launched in March, so brand new, getting an exclusive. We're just trying to kind of share the word about it. But so we started our work with registered dietitians. So that's the, group that we know that we are. So we're providing nutrition education and resources for registered dietitians. But, as we're looking at how else can we reach consumers, we realize that consumers are not, always going to registered dietitians. They're getting their nutrition information from a variety of different sources. And I think we identified certified personal trainers as one of those sources that, they're talking about this with their clients pretty frequently. Our insights showed that they're spending almost an equal amount of time talking about nutrition as they are fitness, just based on the questions that they're getting from their clients. Again, going back to that many different aspects of health. So I think, when we're looking at certified personal trainers there, we found that they are interested in nutrition information. They're being really proactive about trying to find the nutrition information just because they want to obviously help their clients. They want to, deliver useful advice and provide that information. But I think that where we found the gap was even in our own resources, our current education materials for registered dietitians are at a really high scientific level. They're for someone with a heavy nutrition science background. So we really found there was a gap in other kinds of content that are at a more high level or really just short form nutrition information on general or basic nutrition information for professionals like certified personal trainers and fitness professionals that may not have that nutrition background. We really just wanted to be able to provide that type of information, on more general topics that are really reflective of what the types of questions that they're getting from their clients or from consumers. So that led us to create this website, really just focused specifically on those short form general nutrition topics and information on topics that are specifically relevant to certified personal trainers and fitness professionals. Again, what are the common questions that they're getting and how can we help them answer those? So I think we really focused on content that meets the CPT audience and their clients' interests, that's up to date, really provides insights and information and a science in a simple way, but then also provides that supporting data and really just making sure that it's evidence-based, which I think is kind of where the gap is, as you said, there's a lot of information and noise out there, but not all of it's evidence-based and scientifically backed. So we want to make sure that we're kind of, distilling down all of the science information out there and making sure that it's kind of easily accessible and available for this audience.
When I think about the noise out there, the thing that, I always think about are some of the myths that are going around and that are being kind of echoed by people with large followings potentially. So this next section could be pretty fun. What are some of the biggest myths that you've seen gaining traction, especially lately? And then the follow-up question to that, we'll separate this for after, but how can professionals, certified personal trainers, registered dietitians, whoever it is, anybody who's ready and comfortable kind of communicating that science, how can they push back without alienating their audience? Because it can be like, if somebody thinks that X thing is going on, X myth is real, whatever it is, if you just say, oh, nope, you're dumb, nope, that's wrong, you're dumb, like that's not going to help somebody change their opinion. You don't want to make them feel that way just because they heard, something that was incorrect from a different place. You want to be able to educate while, empowering them. I hate to use that. I almost love to use that with, that's
Yeah.
your kind of tagline. But so anyway, let's go back to it. What are some of the biggest myths that you've seen on social media or, just on the internet in general?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I feel like I see a new myth every single day. I feel like there's so many out there. It's so hard to keep up. I feel like there's obviously a ton of myths around different dietary practices. So you see, paleo's not as big anymore, but like paleo, keto, plant-based, like there's a ton of information going around those kind of diets. And we have some information on our website that kind of gives it's a quick one pager on like, here's what the science says. Here's what people use it for. Here's what the science says. Like, just correcting that really quickly. I think there's also a lot of, misinformation and myths around different claims. So like non-GMO organic, different types of claims out there. So again, like we have some myth busting around like what people think that, why they purchase organic or non-GMO and like what the actual purpose is or what the science says about it. So I think that's another kind of big reason why we wanted to start this is that, a lot of times CPTs will get their clients will come to them and they'll ask, I heard this, like, can you tell me if it's true or not? And so we want to just provide them with a quick snippet of like, this is what this is what, the common perception is. And this is what the science says. These are the facts about it. So I think that's, something that we've heavily incorporated throughout for a variety of different topics. I think as far as how to respond back, again, I think it's really just, it's digging deeper into the messages and figuring out, like going behind the headlines. And so critically evaluating what this headline might say this, or the myth might say this, but like, what does the actual science say? And I know that's difficult. I fully recognize that. I think, we do have some resources to help out with that, but I think it's kind of just making sure that when you do kind of dig in and find out the reason and the science behind it, sticking to the facts, making sure that you're representing the true science without kind of sensationalizing the statements, which is, I know it's a lot of times, that's what gets the clicks or the information, especially if you're on social. But I think just making sure they're sticking to the facts, providing references and evidence where possible. I think that's always, it's hard to, I say it's hard to, argue with black and white facts or science or, references. So if you have those receipts, if you have those references, everyone can dig into the science themselves. And then I think also just being truthful about representing the findings, not overstating them or even oversimplifying them in a way that might misrepresent the findings. I know a lot of times it's hard because you want to make sure that it's simple enough for someone to understand, but sometimes that can lose some of the nuances of the science and make it to where the meaning's kind of lost. So I think, that's our biggest, I guess, recommendation is kind of just go with facts rather than, like you said, emotion or, reacting emotionally. I feel like I know it's hard, but looking at the science behind it and making sure that you have those references is always helpful.
And so if you were a personal trainer or a coach, what would you do and how would you use the empowered education, the platform that you're building, the website you're building, all the information out there? How would you use it in a way that, makes their coaching better?
Yeah. So we've really just tried to balance. We have two different types of materials on our website. And I think the first is that client facing information. So as I mentioned, there's we've looked at all the scientific evidence and kind of pulled out the main points and made sure that they're easily accessible and digestible, quickly summarized, and having those quick tips and nutrition talking points, a variety of different topics that are client facing, I think is one way that it can be used. And then there's also some materials on there that just go beyond just providing nutrition information and really focus on skill building and education that really empowers, pun intended, the CPTs to improve their knowledge and their abilities to understand and interpret, translate nutrition science, and how to use various nutrition insights or ideas to improve the advice that they're providing clients. An example is, we provide all of the scientific references for each resource, as you mentioned. We also want to, in case someone wants to go in and kind of dig in for themselves, but we also provide education around how to read and interpret some of those references in research articles. So really just enhance their understanding and translation abilities. So what to look for in a scientific article, like what different terms used in science mean and like what they're, translating them. So I think there's education materials on that are really just focused on skill building of CPTs and fitness professionals to just kind of build their own knowledge so that if we don't have the answer on there, they can go and find it themselves and feel confident enough to do so. I think providing, like I said, current nutrition science around like trending diets and dietary practices, but then also tips on how to communicate nutrition science. So it's like taking the information that we have and then, tips on how to use it.
I think everything that you've put together for this is going to go a very long way in, I don't think you've ever lost the trust of personal trainers or coaches or anything like that, but I think it's going to help build the trust and say like, oh, wow, okay, these people are looking out for me. They're trying to make it as easy as possible to not only find the research, but then also understand it, read it, and then disseminate it too. So it is a really good resource. But one area that might be a little bit tougher is like the general public, trying to build trust with the general public, especially when some people have a misconception about food companies, what their goals are, what their role is in the world. And there's a lot of skepticism toward big food brands. PepsiCo's a big food brand. They're really, really, really big. This is not a mom and pop shop at this point. So how do you and your team approach building trust while being a part of a massive company like PepsiCo?
Yeah, and really that's where my team comes in. Is like we're trying to spread the word about what we're doing in terms of our pet positive corporate goals, and then also the expertise of my team. There's so many nutrition experts on my team in different areas that are working really hard on a variety of different things. Like I said, we're working as far as our pet positive corporate goals. We're working to reduce sodium, saturated fat, added sugar, and also add in positive nutrition, diverse ingredients like whole grains and legumes, and in both our new products and our existing products. So that's something that we're working hard towards. I think as part of a large organization, we also have all these experts that have the best available science or the best available expertise to look into the science. So I feel like that's another area, again, that people don't realize or recognize is that there are, these experts that are working behind the scenes to make sure that, the products that we're providing, we're making sure that we're improving the nutrition of them and that we are communicating about them appropriately. I also think that really just heightening the awareness on all of the activities that we're doing that many people may not realize we're doing, hopefully will help build that trust, both among consumers and the public. A lot of times, like, they're not coming to us asking the questions. They're not coming to PepsiCo to ask the questions. They're coming to their trusted healthcare professionals. So we want to make sure that we're providing them with the resources and skills that they need to provide the information to consumers, and kind of work through it that way.
You're somebody who has, you know, you have a direct line to the internal teams. You told me that you talk to Cheetos and you talk to Quaker and, you talk to these different teams, but then you're also communicating to the public. So you're kind of like this intermediary between those two. What have you learned about how people interpret some of the messages that may go out from these individual teams, the small, I say air quotes, smaller teams like Cheetos, like Pepsi, like Quaker, whatever it is, right? How do people interpret those messages, or what have you learned about how people interpret those messages? But then also, how do we help the general consumer make more informed choices?
Yeah. And I think that that's, as I mentioned earlier, kind of where my marketing background or in my MBA studies kind of helps is that, realizing what gets people's attention a lot of times is those things that are new or extreme or shocking, and the reality of it is dietary guidance is made to be inherently simple and general and easily interpreted and easily adopted so that it's more of a lifestyle and it can be maintained. So nutrition is not always sexy. It's not always, it's not always extreme. So I think that's where we struggle is like, how do we get that message out there in a way that's compelling? So again, we have our work cut out for us, but it's something that we're working on with the brands and then also with some of our messaging as well. And then I think it's also common for people to look for like quick fixes or easy answers to the problem. And I think I mentioned this earlier too, is that, a lot of times the quick fixes, they don't have the nutrition science evidence that available to support them. And I think it also, there's, again, nutrition science is not a quick fix. It's an overall lifestyle change. So it's going to be something that is simple and easy to, implement and be maintained, because anything that, can't be maintained, you kind of lose out on the benefits of it
Yeah.
in the long term. And I think also the results are slower.
Yeah.
Like they take time because it's a lifestyle change. And I think that's where we lose people is like they want like one simple answer, one simple like quick fix. And that's just not how nutrition works. Like there's just so many different aspects that influence our health and our diet. So I think again, that's another way that we may lose people in the messaging that we'd have to work with. But and then I think too that it's easy to oversimplify nutrition topics or messages because and the intention is good. It's to help consumers easily understand them and really just know what we're talking about. But oversimplification sometimes leads to interpretation or misrepresentation of some of the science and the true evidence of it. It's nutrition science is just so complex. There's just so many different factors that influence our overall health and our diet, and simplifying it kind of loses some of those nuances. I think sometimes again, just oversimplification is our enemy there. I mean, overall, I think crafting messages or making messages that are balancing that simple, compelling language and compelling message with dietary guidance that really reflects the current nutrition science environment is so difficult and really time consuming because, sifting through all of that research takes a large amount of time. So I think that just kind of stresses the importance of finding those trusted sources who are skilled in this and leaning on them to kind of sift through it for you. And, break down the nutrition science in a way that is relevant for your audience and resonates with kind of the types of questions and things that you might be getting.
I love that you said that there's no quick fixes, because like you said, if you try to do one of those, whatever it is, kind of quick fix, like if you can't sustain it, it means nothing because the body, is so slow to change. If somebody wants to lose 10 pounds of body fat in a week, I mean, good luck. Like it's not happening. You know what I mean? And so it's okay. Instead of that, what would be a quick fix is, what small, very, very small changes could we make to your daily or weekly dietary habits and patterns? That's the shortcut. That's the quick fix. And then you do that
Yeah.
for a period of months and years. And then it will, maybe then it will lower your LDL cholesterol. Maybe then it will bring you to a healthy body weight. Maybe then you will start feeling more energetic or sleeping better, or whatever it is, kind of health metrics that you're looking at. Yeah, the quick fix is unfortunately very, very slow. The beautiful thing though is it's the simple stuff. It's the simple stuff that really has the biggest impact. The shortcuts are usually very complex and they don't really go anywhere. They are not that beneficial, but it's the simple stuff done over and over again for a long period of time that really has the biggest impact. So I guess my advice for the people listening would be to try to analyze what your dietary pattern looks like. You do not need to pull out like a beaker and a food scale and measurement of every single thing, but just try to be generally aware. Okay, am I getting enough fiber? And you don't really need to count your grams of fiber if you don't want to. Are you eating a variety of fruits and veggies and plants in general, legumes, like you mentioned, seeds, nuts, whatever it is? Are you getting a variety of those things? If not, that's a great place to start. Are you eating protein source at every single meal? If not, that's a great place to start. You do those two things, I mean, you are well on your way to a very healthy dietary pattern. So just please try not to complicate it too much. And one thing that you had said was trying to follow and listen to somebody that you trust, and part of the problem here is that people can trust somebody that in experts' eyes is very untrustworthy. They might be not a credible source of information, but it can be hard to tell. If somebody said, hey, go on social media, spend 15 minutes, try to find the most credible dentist on there. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know anything about dentistry. Like I know I floss and I brush my teeth, but I don't know much beyond that. So it'd be kind of hard. So what I would ask to you is one, how do they find somebody who is credible? And then two, well, let's start there. How do they find and evaluate somebody who is credible?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we have resources of this on our Empowered Education website. We have a list of some credible sources to start with. I think we also have some resources on how to determine, if a piece of nutrition information or health information online is credible or accurate. I think there's a couple different questions you can ask yourself. I think asking yourself, who's putting the information out? Is it a credible and, organization, or is it a, trusted organization, and what their, motive is for putting out that information? I think also looking at when the information is published, you want to make sure that it is up to date and it is, not something that's 20 years old. It's something that's, more recent and relevant. I think you want to look at what information they're providing, looking at the references that they're providing. Where's the science coming from, or where's their statements coming from? They should be providing their references. If they're not, ask them, where'd you come up with that, or where'd you get that information? I mean, if they're got it from somewhere, hopefully they'll provide that. I think that's a trusted source would be willing to provide the references. And then I also just think, using kind of your gut check and seeing like, okay, if I dig into this myself, is it confirming what these messages say? Or is it an oversimplification? Or is it, a sensationalized, representation of the science? So I think there's a lot of different things that you can do, or you can look at when you're looking at a piece of information, and determine if it's something that you would consider trusted, and make up your mind yourself and go from there.
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said in trying to evaluate whether somebody can be trusted or not. If you could give somebody one piece of advice, for somebody who's trying to eat well without, feeling overwhelmed by all the conflicting messages or voices online, what would it be? What would that one piece of advice be?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head. No notes. That it's really just about keeping it simple. It's focusing on those small things that you can do to incorporate them into your lifestyle that also can be maintained. So that's the key. It's something that can be part of your daily life. So it's eating more whole grains. It's eating more fruits and vegetables, more lean protein, especially like legumes and plant-based vegetables where you can. And all of that will just allow you to get the positive nutrients that you need in your body. I think there's also, trying to limit those nutrients that we need less of. So sodium, saturated fat, added sugar, like it's as simple as that. You don't have to make it overly complicated. It's really just doing whatever you can to eat more of those positive nutrients and eat less of those, nutrients we don't need any more of. So I think where people kind of get off track is the extreme or the kind of restricted diets. I think there's not a lot of scientific evidence to support those. The science really just points to that, overall lifestyle and healthy dietary habits. I think, again, if it's hard to maintain, you're losing out all those benefits that you got in the short term. And really just making sure that you're doing things that are appropriate for your diet, appropriate for your lifestyle. There's going to be different nuances, obviously, depending on your individual health or conditions or dietary and health goals. If there is something specific, highly recommend, reaching out to a registered dietitian, and they're really trained in making those specific adjustments for you beyond like, the overall healthy diet. If there are specific adjustments that you might need for whether it's, diabetes or heart disease and you need lower sodium diet, like there's different, recommendations and modifications that are individual to you. A registered dietitian can absolutely help with that. But again, just looking for those credible experts and in the areas that you're looking to improve your diet or your health is always helpful.
So let's move on to the last section of questions we have here, and it's to help people get to know you a little bit better, because when I was kind of looking into your background and things like that, I read that you read over 200 books in 2024. What were a few that stuck out? I mean, 200 books is insane. It's just like I've been trying to increase. I have a whole bookshelf full of books over here. Honestly, I buy books faster than I read them, unfortunately, because I just see recommendations
Same.
like, "Yep, looks good to me, buy them." But you're actually like getting through the list, which is very impressive. So, what were a few of the books that stuck out to you the most, and why?
Yeah. And I will preface, these are reading for enjoyment books. These are not reading, I'm not reading nutrition science textbooks. So it is definitely on my personal time. And big fan of audiobooks. And that's, I do that. That's how I motivate myself to clean my house and anything else. So it's really just multitasking, making the most out of my time. But yeah, you posed this question. I had to really think hard because picking from 200 books is hard. But a couple of books I read, that stood out to me over the past year or so is There's a recent book, Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. So I thought it was obviously I love Emily Henry. It's great book. It's about a journalist that's writing a memoir about a famous woman and her family. So without getting into any spoilers or anything for those that haven't read it, I really enjoyed this because I think that, similar to what we've been talking about in our here, it's, not everything is how it seems. You really need to kind of push beyond the headline and figure out the real story. But then I also think that it's important to recognize when you might be getting two versions of the truth. And it doesn't mean that both are, one is more of a truth than the other, but two versions of the truth. So most spoilers I'll provide, but thought it was relevant to our conversation as well. The second book I'll share is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. It's a very popular book
Very
out right
popular.
now.
I've heard of that one.
You know,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's big, but I think couple of points again without spoilers, but the power of compelling writing, I think is throughout that. I am not a fantasy reader. I'm very much not in that genre, but it still hooked me, and really balancing those relatable interactions with situations and descriptions that really brought me into the story. And I think that's something that we can all kind of use in our communication is making sure that's compelling to kind of draw people in. And then don't underestimate a determined woman, no matter how unlikely she is to succeed. I think that's a big theme in the book. And then I think the third one is that there's different types of strengths. So there's physical strength. There's also unique strengths that really serve everyone and the way that they're supposed to. So I think that's a theme kind of throughout the book that I took away that I feel like is inspiring. And then also it's just an enjoyable book. It's great.
So one other thing that I found was that you love traveling. How does exploring, and I'm assuming around the world, could be around the US, doesn't, whatever it is. First, what's been the most enjoyable place you've been to, or the coolest place you've been to? And then, how does exploring new cultures shape, your views on food, nutrition, or even communication?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a ton of places. It's hard to pick a favorite. I feel like I'll go with Italy. So we went to Italy. We went all around, Italy. It was a fast paced, couple days in each place. And it was just fascinating to see even how one country, different areas differed from each other. I think obviously the food and the culture and all of that was my favorite parts. And it's just beautiful. So I'll pick that for now. Yeah, no, I enjoy traveling. I enjoy seeing other cultures. And I think it's really just made me have that empathy and understanding for different cultures and how different foods different foods and even food and eating occasions might serve different functions for different groups. So I think, it's not a surprise that food is deeply personal to all of us. So I think it serves purpose of not only nourishing our bodies, but also, building community and a sense of belonging. When's the last time you went to a party that didn't have food and drinks? Never.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's a time to kind of get together. Yeah. So it's a time to get together and really just build that community. I also think food and beverages bring us comfort. It evokes different memories or nostalgia, or just brings us joy when we eat something. I think that's another thing that people don't think about when they think about food. So all in all, I think it really just kind of brings to light what different people place importance on regarding foods and beverages, and kind of that dictates what kind of advice and information you provide them. So if you tell someone to not eat a cultural food because it might be high in sodium and all that, that's not going to happen. They eat that because when they get with their family on Sundays, they eat that. I think it's having that empathy and making sure you're meeting people where they are and providing solutions for them that work for them and their lifestyle and their culture is just really important. And so learning about those different cultures is then fascinating and really fun. And I think it's something that, everyone should definitely experience and then, incorporate into their advice or their interactions with others.
My last question for you. Science moves. I was going to say kind of fast, but at the same time, there are certain principles that don't really change much. But what's something that you've changed your mind on in the past few years, either professionally or personally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to learn and open to learn new things. I think, there, like you said, nutrition science is probably one of those, it's slow moving. So
Slow,
it's,
yeah.
a lot of the same. Yeah, a lot of the same concepts, but I think there always are new things coming out. So I'm always open and I'm always willing to say like, yes, this is what I thought, but I've learned different and absolutely changed my mind. So I think, as we dig into the science and we learn more about different topics, that it's important to keep that open mind and keep that, flexibility to change your mind. I'll kind of go in a different direction and say what I thought, I've changed my mind about in terms of social media. So I really thought there was, the only way that you could provide nutrition education and nutrition information a lot of times was either in the classroom or in the hospital. Like, and that's where people wanted to see it. But I think that there's, a lot of different ways that you can share it. I think obviously there's a lot of information out on the internet and on social media. I guess my assumption was that it was mostly just like those, headline worthy pieces or those like trends and misinformation almost. But I really was encouraged that there's been a lot of evidence based and accurate information on social. There's just as much, I would say. And it's also got a significant amount of traction and acceptance, which is, again, just really encouraging. I think, there is an appetite and space for sharing that kind of content in a more social friendly format, and people are open to it. So I think that, that's changed my mind in terms of like how we might share the information. Yeah, so we're just trying to get more information out on social, and I think it's encouraging that people are open to receiving information that way. So we're doing what we can in that way, but I think it's helpful, and it's definitely changed my mind and how we're sharing our information and different ways we might share it.
Awesome. Morgan, this has been a fantastic conversation. Your work is a genuinely important bridge between science and everyday life. And I really appreciate, I'm not a registered dietitian. I am a nutritionist, which is not a protected label in the States. So my dog could call itself a nutritionist if it learned some words. But, you know,
Impressive.
but I balance, the fitness side of things, the lifting, all that with, the personal trainer side of things with the nutrition side of things. And it seems like that's, not it seems like that is something that your team is trying to support. And so I'm really grateful for that. And all the coaches who follow me, I really do recommend Empowered Education. I've gone through the resources. When I reached out to Morgan before I did, I found her Instagram page, and then I was looking at all of the work that she's done, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, I was like, okay, what's the catch? I mean, genuinely, like, I'm like, what's the catch? I mean, it's all free out there. It's really good. So if you're a coach listening to this, I definitely recommend it. Even if you're not a coach and you just want some information with the resources, it's very easy to understand. Morgan and her team have done a great job of trying to distill the information to make it, there's key takeaways, and it's really easy to kind of bridge the gap between research, but also like how you're applying that to real life. So definitely highly recommend it. Before we wrap it up, Morgan, where can people find you or learn more about what you and your team are building?
Yeah, so our website is www.pepsicoempowerededu.com. So you can visit that. You can also follow on Instagram at pep_empowered_RD. And then feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, Morgan Sowers on there. We're posting a lot of the new content and, sharing existing content that we have on there, variety of different topics. So it'll give you kind of a test or teaser of what we have available and just kind of remind you to check out our website. But yeah, we have lots of resources, as Alex said. We also have a newsletter where we can share out content just once a month and kind of keep everyone up to date on what we have that's new or, relevant to what's going on.
Everybody, check the show notes of this episode for the website, for the Instagram page, and then also Morgan's LinkedIn. If you are curious, highly recommend checking those out. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to send them my way. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And that's it. All right, everybody, take care.